Hi, I'm Rowan and I'm a copywriter. I've been a copywriter for about 10 years and full-time for 4. And I wanted to share with you 5 common traps that a lot of copywriters are getting into at the moment. I want to help you avoid those. I want to share a realistic timeline for what your career kind of looks like. What does the first phase, second phase, third phase look like? So you understand and you plan accordingly. And the third thing I want to share is what you should be doing right now if you're serious about breaking into copywriting or leveling up.
Tip number 1, surrounding yourself with peers. And it's a very critical part of your development process as a copywriter. And the reason why I advocate for it is because you just don't know what you don't know. Trying to figure it out on your own could get you to a certain point, but then you're kind of going to stagnate because you just don't have the visibility into your blind spots to know what you can improve and how to improve it without feedback. But it was crazy when I joined a staff, how quickly I learned so much more. I didn't realize how copywriting fit into like the broader ecosystem of like content and marketing and advertising and sales enablement. And I also wasn't aware that I was making some interesting mistakes in my copy because no one was giving me that feedback. My clients certainly didn't know. And so being surrounded by actual writers and other marketers and not only gave me the perspective of what copywriting should be in the bigger scope of a business, but it also helped me become a better writer. And I probably learned more in the first 3 months than I had in the 8 years that I was trying to do the stuff on my own. So I'm a huge proponent of locking yourself into a peer group. If you can be in a 9-to-5, an in-house, an agency, at least for a year or 2, you're going to advance so quickly, so fast, and learn so much more than you would on your own. Plus that invaluable feedback on your copy, because at the end of the day, you're a writer and getting better at writing is really important. Not to mention the network that you get from that. It's like built in when you join a company. So that's a side tangent, but I really love it. And I realize that it's kind of it might be an unpopular opinion because everyone's talking about freelance, but freelance isn't for everybody. I do think that being in a 9-to-5, at least for a little while, sets you up with great experience. You learn how to manage a schedule, you learn how to interact with other teams, clients, you learn how to ask really good questions, you learn so much in a shorter span of time. If you have your sights set on freelance, that's cool. Just make sure that you're seeking out a peer group that can give you feedback, and make sure that peer group is full of content and copywriters who are actually working in real life and can give you sound advice. Tip number 2 is practice. You definitely won't become a good writer if you don't write. Most of the really great writers I know have a swipe file and they're like constantly looking at the world through a copywriter's lens, and they're like, oh, I like this. And they're clipping it and they're screenshotting it and they're saving it to a file because they're always noticing really good copy, and reading and being really observant is part of practicing. But you also have to actually write. So this is where I wanted to share the timeline that I was talking about, because there's an evolution of your career and you cannot skip any phase. You are going to go through each of these phases and you won't get to the end where you have a sustainable, long-term, healthy career without these other 2 phases. So the first one is the phase that new writers are in, and that is what I call the replicate phase. This is the phase where you're just learning, you're absorbing, and why I call it the replicate phase is because when you're a new writer, you're finding your voice. You don't have a style yet per se, you're adopting pieces here and there, and that's why I call it replicating. There's another reason I call it replicating too. When I was first getting started, I would pull up a web page and I would have Canva right beside it, and I would literally replicate the entire page. The banner, the social proof, as seen on TV or featured in, the services, all of that stuff. I just recreate it. And the more that I did that, the more I started noticing all the pieces that go into a homepage. And that's kind of how I learned homepage copy. I did that with blogs too. You can do that with email copy. You can do that with social media. The list is endless, but replicate is that first phase. And that actually takes me to phase number 2 in the timeline, which is repeat. So once you have replicated in your testing styles Now you're in the repeat phase, which is kind of like the intense practice heavy phase where you're really honing your craft. This is the part where you've done it enough to notice the patterns. You notice the strategies, you notice the architecture behind things. You can ask really smart questions now. You're much more comfortable with manager or team interactions because you have a handle on the content at this point. And then you have this phase that's kind of magic. There's this shift that happens in your career when you go from being somebody that's good at their job to somebody who can almost design the next part of your career because you have results, you have clout, you have years of experience. And this is where you become that expert. That these are the seniors and the lead copywriters, these are your directors of comm and that sort of thing. But you don't get to the senior copywriter roles where you get those really healthy paychecks without practicing. Now, let's say that you're ready to get going. Like, where do you start? What do you do? So there's a couple of things that I love to recommend for people who are getting started, and they're kind of what I did. So YouTube University, for sure. Everything on there is free for the most part. There are some membership YouTube channels, but you can find everything you need to get started for free on YouTube. And that kind of transitions me into my next place to look, which is Practitioner Courses, a course that's developed by somebody who's actually doing the thing in real life. So a copywriter or a content writer who's actually working with clients has developed and put together some sort of course. Those are really great because those are like boots on the ground, real tactics that are helping and working right now in the market. So those are really valuable. And then there are certifications. One of my favorites is from HubSpot. I'm going to leave it in the description around this video. And HubSpot actually certifies in a bunch of different marketing techniques and a bunch of writing. So I highly recommend that because then you can put that on your resume and your LinkedIn and your portfolio. Tip number 3 is create a simple portfolio. Now, I've gone through an evolution of what I think a portfolio is, and for the most part, the components are all the same, but I no longer think that a Google Drive or a Canva or a .io, one of those like portfolio building platforms, is right or wrong. Any of them are fine. It's the stuff you put in your portfolio that really matters. And there's pros and cons to doing all of them, and maybe that'll come in a different video. But, maybe you should subscribe. Yeah, this is my first upload. It doesn't matter what the platform is. And I think that's the big takeaway. It doesn't matter what you choose, but it does matter how you build it. Any portfolio is better than nothing. It's a prerequisite. It's a non-negotiable. You won't get an interview without samples, right? And my first portfolio I made on Canva. I still use Canva for all of my client portfolios because it's super customizable. You can do lots of design with it. You can put anything in it that you want. It's also free. You can share it as a website. You can download it as a PDF and share it that way. Like, there's just like lots of flexibility with that. Love it. The other one I really love is Google Drive. I get comments sometimes like, oh, you can have a professional portfolio in Google Drive? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I was a staff writer, I was surprised to know that like almost none of the writers on staff actually had anything formal at all. It was just random links. So even a Google Drive, organized really well, is very professional, very acceptable. And I'm saying that as somebody who's hired writers. So you can definitely do Google Drive. Understanding how competitive the job market is and how little time people have to devote to like setting up a portfolio. If you need something fast, I recommend a Google Drive portfolio dashboard. This is something I invented, and I have a step-by-step copywriter starter kit that walks you through the setup of a Google Drive portfolio. And it's literally everything that you need to set up a professional portfolio and be ready to start writing literally today. So how many times can I say literally? So if you're brand new and you need to do a little bit more credibility building, this is a fantastic template for you to follow. And it does a little bit of that legwork for you. So you can grab that for free in the description below. Okay, now the 5 common traps that I want to put you on the lookout for so you can avoid these. Number 1, pick a niche right away. That's probably the worst advice when you are brand new. That is not the time to pick a niche. First of all, you don't know what you're good at and what you like yet. So you need to dabble, you need to experiment, you need to try a lot of different kinds of content. I think being a generalist at the start of your career is perfect because then you get to try it all and figure out what you love, what you're really good at, and what you don't like at all. You'll never know if you don't dabble. So love to dabble, don't pick a niche. Trap number 2, expect to make major money right away, right? So remember the timeline. You got to put in the work to get good enough to command those paychecks. You have to know about the strategy. There's a lot that you have to understand before you can make those really big bucks. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't land a really great contract or job right away, but I just don't want you to go into it expecting a certain thing and it's not reality. So if you go the 9-to-5 route, right, entry-level jobs, the last time I looked, are anywhere between $35,000 and like $50,000. And that's your first couple of years. Now, different markets, different companies will vary, and you need to plan accordingly. You don't want to make some sort of rash decision because you thought you'd be making 6 figures, but you're not. So just word to the wise. Trap number 3, opportunities will fall in your lap. Now, maybe this was just me. I will tell you an embarrassing story. I was a part-time writer, but I was a full-time retail manager. And I started listening to lots of social media podcasts and, absorbing all of the self-help and personal development, entrepreneurship podcasts and YouTube videos. Yes, I was practicing, but I hadn't built my portfolio yet, and I thought for some reason that I would just radiate writer energy, and maybe like a marketing director would come in while I was folding sweaters and be like, "Oh my God, I love your vibe. Are you a writer?" And then I'd get a job. I don't know why I thought that, but your frequency will not attract jobs. Make sure that you are being active about pursuing that next job, whatever that happens to be. Trap number 4. Offer free or discounted work without guardrails. So we all start off, lower rates, and we bump those rates up as we get better, we get results, we get testimonials. But some people want to go even deeper when they're first starting just to get something for their portfolio. And so they'll do free or discounted content or copy. Where it goes sideways is when you don't put really definite borders on that project, and then the client comes back expecting that rate forever. So you want to be really clear up front with the parameters, right? I'm going to give you this 5-step email sequence for a discounted rate so that I can get something in my portfolio. That way the client knows that there is a cutoff. This isn't like your forever rate. You don't set yourself up for like a really uncomfortable conversation later. Trap number 5, you need to know everything before you start. Now, this one might be for you overthinkers out there, but this one was definitely me. Every time I learned about something, I'd be like, oh my God. And then there's this other thing. There's like a million bunny trails. And I got a little overwhelmed and I started to think, oh, maybe this is really too hard or I can't do it. But everyone starts knowing almost nothing. So just know that. Sometimes you're not the only one in the room who doesn't know the answer, and everyone Googles stuff, even the director, okay? I directed a content department and I was Googling stuff almost every day. If you are resourceful, if you know how to ask a good question, you're gonna be fine. And you just need to practice, be open to feedback, ask good questions, and that's it. Just go along for the ride. Know the timeline. Don't try to skip your steps. Get into a peer group, practice often, and build your portfolio and avoid those traps. Set yourself up for realistic longevity. And if you want more advice like this, if you want to learn about clients and what they expect and how to build portfolios, stick around because that's exactly what this channel is for. And I'll see you in the next one.